Thank you. This month is the exact 12th anniversary of the first painting in my series, Americans Who Tell the Truth, who happened to be Walt Whitman. And when I painted him, I didn't really want to do this. I was an artist, a surrealist really, and an illustrator who was supporting himself and his family by doing that work. And I thought really I was doing the kind of work that I should be doing in this culture. I was fulfilling, I thought, my social obligations. And then everything changed for me in the wake of 9/11, but it wasn't 9/11 itself that caused that. It was what came right afterwards. In fact, a lot of you will remember, especially you people who are closer to my age than some of these students here, that within just a few days, our government was promoting a war against Iraq, a country that had nothing to do with 9/11. And I was, I live in a little town of Brooksville, Maine, and I was thinking at this moment, what can I do? What can I do to get some kind of voice? I was so full of anger, grief at all the victims there were going to be, cynicism about the fact that our so-called free press in this country was doing nothing to counter the kinds of things our government was saying, and then just shame, the way we were promoting our foreign policy as just being bullying, really, to the rest of the world. And I knew enough from having been an artist a long time that by shoving those feelings in people's faces, people say artists express themselves, but I knew that if I just expressed what I was feeling, anger, grief, cynicism, and shame, nobody'd really want to look at that. That I had to find some other thing to do, and it had to be positive. And really what I had to do was find out a way to take the energy from those feelings and use them in the service of, if you will, love. But what? What would that be? And it finally came to me that the thing to do was going to be led really by my sense of shame. I didn't like identifying myself with this country through the context of Dick Cheney and George Bush. But let me just say something. This isn't about left or right politics, really. To me, it was about a betrayal of the ideals of the country. And this, of course, had gone on for a long time, and I've lived long enough to see this happen a lot, but I had never felt that I had to get involved quite the way I did this time. And I also knew that probably in order to get a decent voice, I was going to have to do what I do best, which is paint pictures, and somehow mix that with my passion and produce something. And what shame led me to was to reject obsessing about those characters and instead start surrounding myself with people from this country that I admired, embracing Frederick Douglass, Susan B. Anthony, Mother Jones, Elizabeth Cady Stanton, W.E.B. Du Bois, that these were people from this country that I admired, and I decided I'd much rather spend time with them than our current leadership. That began, and I say, at first it was very reluctant because I had no idea how I was going to actually support myself doing this, because one of the things I determined when I decided to paint the first portrait was if I went ahead and made a series of these portraits that I couldn't possibly sell them, because the people I was going to paint I already knew, even though I didn't know whom they would be, I knew that they were all people who had given a whole lot of their lives to this country and asked really nothing in return. And there was something wrong for me with the idea of selling it. But it began an incredible learning curve. Many of the people that we all know about as icons of this country, we really don't know much about them. We are not taught in our schools much about their lives, where their courage came from, where their perseverance came from, what kept them going, what they gave up, what they thought they were doing. And so in order to paint the portraits, I had to spend actually more time than painting researching, reading interviews, reading commentary, trying to understand who these people were and the role they played and why, in fact, it was necessary. It seems to me it's one of the great ironies of our culture that people who stand up for the things that we actually all say that we believe in: justice, freedom, equality, inalienable rights. The people who stand up for those things have to show great courage in our culture to actually stand up for them. And I just want to give you two quick examples of the kind of people I was painting and the kind of things they said and what I now have access to, because when I first started this, what I was thinking was, I'm going to take care of myself. I wasn't thinking that I would be launching a project that would take, as of now, 12 years, that it would travel all over this country, get me into schools and colleges and libraries and museums to talk about American history and citizenship and really have a voice of some kind. That never occurred to me. I just thought, I will feel a lot better in the company of the people I'm going to paint, and if it ends up that I've got a lot of paintings in my basement that nobody ever sees, that's okay. But in order to do it, I had to learn from each person, and each person I've painted has taught me an enormous amount about the political and historical, environmental, and workings of this country and what it means to be a citizen. This is one of the people I actually painted very early on. And most of the first subjects were all 19th century people. And here's Wendell Berry, who's still alive. He's a farmer in Kentucky, a writer, an essayist, a novelist, a poet, and of course, the definer, as well as anybody in the world today, of what it means to actually live sustainably on the earth, a land ethic. What I chose, each painting is a big painting. They're on wooden boards. They have words, a quote from each person scratched right into the surface, so there's no doubt why the person is looking at you the way they are and what they're trying to communicate. I mean, I can't believe that when I started doing this that I was doing didactic art that was anathema to me for many years. But here's Wendell Berry, and this quote that I chose from him comes from a essay he wrote at the end of the first Gulf War in 1991, where he says, "The most alarming sign of the state of our society now is that our leaders have the courage to sacrifice the lives of young people in war, but not the courage to tell us to be less greedy and wasteful." And so I ask kids, when I'm in schools, I ask kids, what's he talking about? What are these kinds of courage here, and what's the point of this? And do these two things fit together in some way? And of course, understanding the connection between the economic statement he's making at the end there and the moral statement with the idea of sacrificing life is essential to understanding who we are as an economic and moral force in the world. What it means is that if you build a culture, an economic system, a profit system based on waste and greed, consumption, materialism, and that becomes your primary goal, the enlargement of profit, the expansion of markets, it becomes a necessity to you. You actually make that more important than the lives, in effect, of your own children. Because the one supersedes the other, the economy drives your morality. This is Helen Keller. Most of us know her as, incredible story about her disabilities and how she overcame them. What most of us don't know is about how political she was and how outspoken she was about that. And what I learned from her, and then saw again and again in many other people I painted, is something I think we all need to think a lot about in terms of what a democracy really is. We are led to believe by not only our educational system, but our political system, our media system, all these different systems, tell us that if we have certain structures, if we have voting rights, if we have our government divided into three parts, if we have what we call a media system with at least an option to tell the truth, if we have an educational system, if we have a constitution and a system of laws, if we have these things in place, they actually are the safeguards of a democratic system. In fact, that's not true. In fact, any one of these systems, and all of them, can easily be corrupted by wealth and power to do their bidding rather than the bidding of what a democracy should be. And the point that Helen Keller makes here, when she says, when one comes to think of it, there are no such things. I mean, she's directly taking on our Declaration of Independence. She says, when one comes to think of it, there are no such things as divine, immutable, or inalienable rights. Rights are things we get when we are strong enough to make good our claim on them. In other words, they don't reside in the system. They reside in us and our willingness to engage, to be part of it, to demand them. You know, when the great labor organizer, Mary Harris Mother Jones, was asked in the 19-teens about the possibility that she might get the vote, she was already almost 90 years old, and somebody said, isn't it great that you're going to be getting the vote? And she said, who needs the vote when you can raise hell? You know, there's something really important there. That a lot of times, the willingness to actually go into the streets and raise hell is more important than a vote that's been predetermined by the choices that you've been given. Utah Phillips, the great labor organizer and storyteller and singer of the labor movement, said the degree to which you resist injustice is the degree to which you are free. And Frederick Douglass, who probably, I think, understood the workings of power better than probably anybody maybe ever did, almost like it was a problem in physics. You know, he said, find out what any people will quietly submit to, and you have found out the exact measure of injustice and wrong that will be imposed on them. That is what democracy is about, is that unwillingness to have injustice and wrong imposed on us, to not be silent. This project, Americans Who Tell the Truth, has become, one of the things which we define ourselves now is as narrative activism, telling people stories about people in our past and in our present who are doing things for social, economic, and environmental justice, so that those stories are present for them when they're faced with making decisions about questions of justice and questions of morality. And I want to sort of illustrate that narrative activism through two stories. Not this one in particular, because Rosa Parks, I assume you all know about it, although I'm in schools all over this country, and it's amazing how many schools you can go into and nobody in a classroom can tell you who this woman was, why she acted, what it meant. But I'm assuming that you do, but I want to tell you about this little girl. Her name is Claudette Colvin. I need to say also that when I started this project, well over half the people I've ended up painting so far were people I had never heard of. It's been just incredible to find out what we don't know about our own history and really important parts in it and people who played incredible roles. 9 months before Rosa Parks, a 15-year-old girl, untrained, was sitting on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, the same place, 1955, the spring of 1955, and she was told to move. She was just like Rosa Parks, she was in the front seats of the black section. The white section filled up. Another white person got on. She was told that she had to move. And by the way, there was a seat next to her that was open. The law said that a white person couldn't even sit across the aisle from a black person because of the implied equality. So she had to move, even though the seat was right there. The way this fits into the idea of narrative activism is, think for a minute what story might have been going through her head when she was told to move like that. Probably the one that we would expect to be there, and also the one that, especially as older people and parents, you would want to be there, is the story that says, Claudette, this is 1955, you're in Montgomery, Alabama, it's violent, it's racist, anything could happen here. This is your parent talking, get up and move. You don't want to do this. It's too dangerous. Not only could you be hurt, your house could be bombed, your church could be bombed, the Ku Klux Klan will come and burn crosses. Don't do this. In her black high school, they had been studying Harriet Tubman. And so when she was told to move, that first story wasn't in her head. The story that she was playing and the question she was asking was, well, what would Harriet do? And she knew there was only one answer to that question. Harriet would not move, and she didn't move. And the same thing happened to her as happened to Rosa Parks. She was dragged off that bus. She was shouting the whole time, "The Constitution allows me to sit here." The black community in Montgomery was not ready to deal with her. They didn't think, she was not the poster child that Rosa Parks was for this issue, and they ostracized her. However, the case that went to the Supreme Court that overturned bus segregation was not Rosa Parks' case. That case had Claudette Colvin's name on it. How many of you knew that? I didn't know that. It's just remarkable. And I've been painting a whole series of young people who have done things like that, who've actually changed our history by the actions they were willing to take. And as she says, she was tired of waiting for adults, to do something, who already knew that this was wrong. This is a guy that a lot of you know. This is Woody Guthrie, great folk singer, storyteller. I want to say two quick things about him, or two little stories, and that'll be it. But the first one has to do with the thing that he's most famous for today, and that is the song, "This Land Is Your Land." In most schools in this country, nobody knows who Woody Guthrie is until you say, well, he wrote the song, "This Land Is Your Land." Then they know. They didn't know his name, they didn't know he was responsible for it. But they know the song, but they only know the first 2 or 3 verses of the song, because that's what schools teach. The part that glorifies what a beautiful and big and rambling and communally owned country this is, and how wonderful that feels. That is not why Woody Guthrie wrote the song. He wanted to set up the real question of the song by those first verses. He had been hitchhiking from Oklahoma to Texas in 1940, from Oklahoma to New York City in 1940. And he said that every pickup truck and every car that picked him up was playing "America the Beautiful" in it. And by the time he got to New York, he was so sick of that song, he had to write his own anthem. And what he wrote, this is, of course, right. The Depression is really still going on in 1940. The Depression and the Dust Bowl, and he came right out of that. And so he had been very much involved in it and had seen it. He'd seen the refugees, he'd sung to them, told stories about them. He knew it. His family was that. So he comes to New York and he writes this song down really quickly. The last 2 verses are really, really important, and the one I put on this painting is the one that goes, "One bright sunny morning in the shadow of the steeple by the relief office, I saw my people. As they stood hungry, I stood there wondering if this land was made for you and me." That's what the song was about. If this land was made for you and me. And then he writes another verse in which there's a sign that says private property, and he walks around the other side and sees that it doesn't say anything on the other side, and he says, oh, that's the side that's made for you and me. That's what he was questioning. That's the part that isn't taught in our schools. That's the part the kids don't sing. I find it kind of almost criminal that often the thing that is that so many people in our culture have expended so much energy to do, to say, all of their courage, their perseverance, and then we cut off the part that really encapsulates that feeling and that action. I want to tell one more story about Woody Guthrie. The next year, the Second World War started, and he signed up. He joined the Merchant Marine, and he was a sailor on convoys carrying supplies and troops across the Atlantic. In the convoys, there'd be all the troop ships and supply ships in the center, and the big, all the battleships on the outside to protect them. And practically every night, a lot of convoys would get attacked by German submarines. Woody was on a troop ship, and there are 3,000 men down below in the hold of the ship. And think for a second what that might have been like. You know, you're in the complete pitch darkness, torpedoes and depth charges going off around you. You know that if one hits your boat, because you're already below water level, you're done. And you're isolated, and you're in fear. And Woody's up on deck. At least if they're hit, he probably has a chance. But he gets his guitar, because he's thinking about those men, and he takes his guitar and he goes down into the hold and sings all night while they're under attack with those men, so that they, well, you know what music does. It can bring people together, it can give them courage. It certainly makes a community. It changed everything in terms of their morale on those ships. The people who ran the ships, the captains, became very aware of him, and they wanted him to be there and do that for them when they were going across the water. One night, Woody's down there singing with the men, and he hears voices coming from behind a bulkhead. And he thought, that's weird. I mean, why aren't those men in with the other men? And he goes up to the captain and he says, Captain, I hear these voices. Who are those people? Why don't you open the door and let them in so we can all sing together? And the captain says, well, I can't do that. He said, what do you mean? He said, well, those are the black soldiers. And Woody says, well, open the door. And he said, no, it's against the regulations. And when he took his guitar and said, well, I guess I'm not singing anymore, and he walked away. Well, the captain ran after him and said, he knew how important it was to these men, what he was doing, and so he came after him and he grabbed him and said, I think I'll make an exception to the rules tonight. So he opened the door and let the black soldiers come in and sing with the white soldiers. That was the first time during the Second World War when black and white soldiers were integrated. The point that I want to make about narrative activism is the importance of knowing things like this. Knowing these stories, and now, as Diego said, there are nearly 200 of these portraits over a whole host of issues. We need to know these stories. We need to know what choices we have when we metaphorically ourselves, in all kinds of situations, hear singing behind a wall and know that some injustice is going on. What do we tell ourselves about how to react? If we have an array of heroes and models of, as we call it, courageous citizenship, it becomes a lot easier to align ourselves with them and do the right thing. And I want to thank you all very much for letting me come here and talk. Thanks.